Please welcome from Dunne Raby, also a professor of industrial design at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna with a long-standing affiliation with the Royal College of Art in London, Fiona Raby, followed by student Tiffany Lambert.
Thank you. I'll go straight into my presentation. So in 2004, Tony and I were asked to do a small exhibition at the Science Museum in London, which was aimed at school children looking at the future of energy. And one of the messages the museum gave us was that museums couldn't be seen to be made to make predictions. And meanwhile, on the other hand, they kind of gave us this massive amount of data that more or less said that, oh, the future is going to be in hydrogen. You know, we're going to have hydrogen phones, hydrogen cars, hydrogen buses, everything. You know, but you know, you don't say that. So, of course, hydrogen probably will play a role in the future, but we really wanted to open up a whole set of different alternatives. So in our own research, we kind of came across a whole lot of work where power plants use chicken poo to power 200 houses in the north of England. We thought this was great. And in the Cradle to Cradle book, we had this lovely story about agricultural communities, that when you go to visit someone's house, you're expected to go to the bathroom and leave a gift. Human waste having a lot of valuable minerals, a lot of sort of biodiverse microbes in the soil gives a very healthy harvest. So in the minds of children, we want to put a very different story in. So when they would go to a birthday party, rather than taking something away in a goodie bag, we thought that they would put in their minds that they might have to contribute a little gift. So all of our work is really about technology or emerging technologies, and we feel that we live in sort of a technological deterministic times at the moment, where we're very, very focused on the technologies themselves, and rather than the very human, complex social, political and systems they sit within. So the position that we take is that if the values change, then perhaps the products might change too. So in this way, in this worldview, the humble school lunchbox becomes a very different object. So when the child goes to school, you know, they're required to bring this resource home with them. You know, it's far too valuable to flush down the toilet, and you can't possibly let the school have it. It doesn't belong to them. So this very small object and its imagined behaviour tells us a big story about implicit values in a society and its citizens. And we think that every product reflects values and choices made by society. So in this discussion about participation, I'd like to contribute, my contribution really is the idea that design can be a tool for collective imagining. And imaginings that are embedded in everyday lives and everyday patterns, where designers can take a very empathetic view and tapping into very known behaviours. I think designers have, you know, great talent for making tangible these very sort of very emotional things. It's a very emotional and tacit language, triggering other people's imaginations. So it's not to accept the world as it is now, but how it could be, and to use design to engage people in broadening worldviews. So this is a plane imagined and designed by Norman Bell Geddes in the 1920s, and it embodies a very different set of values than what we might see today. It's a 9-story amphibian plane, twice the size of a Boeing 747 jumbo jet. It's got an orchestra in it, a gymnasium, a solarium, a dining room. It could sleep 660 passengers and fly between Chicago and London, and it was worked out to a very detailed level. And it tells us a very different story about aviation. And we became very, very interested in the idea of big thinking. And there's many historical kind of possibility. People were doing this in history with very, very optimistic times. And we wondered where this was going on in the contemporary world. One of our examples is with Google, that the asteroid mining that being supported by Google and other companies. But we felt that these dreams are very technologically driven rather than socially driven. And we were really looking for the social imagination with the projects that we're doing at the moment. And architects have had a long history of kind of doing this kind of work. This is one of our favourites, Europa, done by MAMO, a study of the European Climate Foundation Roadmap 2050. And what it does is it looks at turning Europe into a shared grid of renewable energy. And what we love, I mean, it's a huge sort of piece of research that they've done, but what we love is this one particular image because it shows a different way in which you could start to organise Europe in a very sort of playful and imaginative way with, new renaming of Europe, the Isle of Winds, the tidal states, Solaria, Geothermalia, Biomassberg. So it's a very simple image, but a very complex set of information and ideas. And artists do this as well. Charles Avery has been visiting an imaginary island for the past 10 years, bringing back artifacts from when he finds them. And there's something very nice about trying to understand where these artifacts come from and leaving it up to the imagination. We love the idea that, if you go to the British Museum, you see this sort of artifacts from ancient civilizations, and you try and imagine what it was like in those civilizations. And the idea that we could sort of project our imaginations in this way. Another one of our very favourite examples is by Luigi Serafini's his Cult Encyclopedia project from the 1980s, where he literally describes, it's all written in this it's imaginary language that you just can't read, but it describes objects and structures and animals and rituals and actions across all this different in this world. And you engage with it in a way that, you can't understand a lot of it, but there's a lot of it that you can start to read into and imagine, what this world is like. And we were very inspired by this kind of work. But I think this set of books is our favourite set of books at the moment, and they sit between, they're books about, they're called the Solution Series, and they sit between the fictional world and the real world, where they reimagine an existing country. Some of them are very based on fiction, which is the Book of Scotland's and the Book of Japan's, but the Book of Finland is very close to real sort of solutions and real issues. And we felt that could we look at this in a similar way, this space between fiction and reality, and could design operate in this way, and we wanted to do an experiment in this space. So Dejan Sujic, the director of the Design Museum, approached us to ask us if we wanted to show some work in the Design Museum, and really we really didn't want to show existing work. We wanted to do a new project. We wanted to do a design experiment of some kind. And we were quite interested in the idea of the museum as an institute, so these active platforms for discussion, places to talk around issues around design, through process of design, places that generate knowledge. So in this spirit of the Sternberg series, we thought we'd do our own kind of United Micro Kingdoms project. So we imagined England. So one of the things we really wanted to look at, if it was possible, was to focus on very small kind of design objects or small things, but see if we could talk about much larger issues. Would this be possible? And really explore this different language of inquiry and see how could design contribute to these kinds of discussions. And we weren't really not sure where we could start, but we came across these very interesting sort of what they call political compasses, where you could, we really wanted to play in this space to put all of our designs and thinkings in a sort of framework. And there's a great website where you can do online where you can actually plot yourself and find out where your beliefs are within this, so I recommend you try it out, it's quite surprising. So we wanted to put ideology and technology together and somehow put them together and see how they might work together. So we put sort of digital and extreme market-led capitalism together. They became the digitarians. Anarchy and self-experimentation. This was one group that were really based on social networks and human capital, and we called them the narco-evolutionists. We had social democracy with biotech, and we called this the bioliberals. And then we had collectivism and nuclear energy, and we called these the communo-nuclearists. And we sort of made a diagram, and we wanted to put it in the context of UK, in the context of England. Not so it was in this imaginary place that we couldn't connect with, or a place far away in China, or in these new areas that are being redeveloped, like in Qatar or somewhere like that. We wanted people who were there, as our audience was in the UK, to really think about their own country and their own lives. And we needed a medium to work with. This took us a long while to work out, well, what we're going to design in this space that explores these different ideas. And I think last year we were up at the World Fair, the New York World Fair, hugely kind of influenced by it, I think. And we chose the idea of transport. And we loved the idea of transport because we felt that it was a highly emotive area and topic which embodies dreams of freedom and individuality. And this is something that we're really interested in exploring, hopes and dreams. So we did a ton of research, and we've sort of collected so many different alternative vehicles from parallel worlds, from artists, from history, and put a whole sort of collection of things together. And we became very, very interested in the whole infrastructure and the way that vehicles have an impact on the infrastructure that they contain. So I'm going to try and take you through a few of them. I hope I can get through 3 of them. So the digitarians. So the digitarians, they're a world of tagging, metrics, total surveillance, tracking, data logging. 100% transparency is the goal of the digitarians. They're organized entirely by market forces. Citizens and consumers are the same. Nature is there to be used up as necessary, governed by technocrats and spreadsheets. For us, it's probably the most dystopian and probably the most familiar and realistic from all of our scenarios. And we were very interested in the whole idea of the electric driverless robo-cars. We've been absolutely fascinated in. And in many ways, the visions for these vehicles they're presented as these very relaxed social spaces where you can, if you're there, you don't have to drive anymore, but you can lounge around on sofas and you can watch TV. But our version of the digicars was very different. It's closer to the economy airlines, squeezing everything you can from a passenger, offering the most sort of basic but humane kind of experience. And this is what we saw as our digicar. So we saw the vehicle moving from a vehicle which navigates space and time to an interface of navigating tariffs and markets. So every square meter of road surface and every millisecond of access at any moment is monetarized and optimized. So the dashboard, we were sort of playing around, well, what would this dashboard look like? And it wouldn't be about speed or revs, it would be more about readouts about money versus time. So the tariffs, we spent a lot of time thinking about the tariff system. They'd be calculated according to a P5 index, which was price, pace, proxemics, priority, and privacy. So power and speed is then replaced by footprint and privacy. So how much space you take up and whether you share your vehicle or not. So we worked with a graduate of ours, Tobias Ravel, to develop a kind of a tariff system based on cellular phones, how we might buy our cellular phones. And if you bought a cellular phone recently, you know how difficult it is. It's meant to be complex, and you're not really sure what kind of deal you get. You're constantly trying to get the next better deal. So the technology in this world is used not to make the world a better place for its citizens, for its digitarians. It's being used to help companies maximize their profits. So we made a sort of modular vehicle. So it's done so that you can stand up, you take up less space. You can work when you're on your way to work to maximize your time. So this is a quite expensive one because it's got quite a large footprint. And it's quite private, so it's probably one of the most expensive ones. But then, you're more likely to communicate with your virtual friends than you are your neighbours. So you can have one with 2, and the back one is obviously a bit cheaper than the front one. There's this one. Side ones as well, equal cost. With 4 stops, there's 4 people can fit in that one. This one's a bit more, a bit more privacy, but there's 2 of you. There's lots of variations, a 4-pod version, a 3-pod version, and this is probably the smallest one, and it can nip in and out of the traffic quite easily. And then, of course, there's one, if you've that's it, you've had enough work, you can't go on any longer. There's an overnight, there's one that you can just lie down and completely, and it'll take you wherever you want. It's probably the one that everyone will be using in the end, to be honest. And so this is our fleet of vehicles, and they could modularize on, I'm sure, in many, many different versions. So we chose to sort of look in at 5 of them. So we imagine the digitarians living this sort of candy-coloured future. And all the colours and things, obviously this can be seen from above, so you can see them well. And it sort of distracts us from this system that prioritises our economics above everything else in the guise of consumer choice. So here they are. And with the digitarians, Digiland is a vast kind of never-ending plain of tarmac. It's a cross between airports, runways, sports fields, and car parks. So the space is full of dense markings which no human can possibly decode, a landscape exclusively for machines. And we were not convinced by all the kind of free-flowing, movement that these sort of digicars were going to allow us to have. We immediately thought of the traffic jam, what was really going to work. So we worked with Nicholas Myers, another graduate of ours, to develop an animation to look and explore different kinds of ways in which the digicars could operate in Digiland. So this is a... So parking, parking can be anywhere, really. You can, because they can move at any point, so you could put cars in any sort of part of the world. So obviously it's very easy to make flows work better. So if there's more going one route, you can actually use the real estate more appropriately. So that works really well. And difficult junctions, they'll probably be able to work out how to get through all of those. But obviously, when it comes down to it, it's going to depend on which tariff you pay, to how fast really you go, and which queue you're going to be in, to make sure you choose that tariff well. So some routes will go faster than the others. And of course, priority cars will obviously always get... So for some people, they will see this as a utopia, but a utopia that comes at a price. So for every one of our sort of vehicles and social community, we try to make very, very appealing things in the system, but equally we try to put some very, very undesirable things in there too. We see this whole space of being a space of trade-off and a space of dilemma. And we're just interested to see how design can operate within this field of complexity and uncertainty, where there's no simple, clear solutions anymore or technological fixes. We're really interested as well as how design, which uses a very different kind of emotional and intuitive language, can add a very different layer to more rational and logical frameworks that are already in place. This is one of the things we're really interested in, bringing this kind of work forward. So the Commune and Nucleus, I can talk about them. They're a non-growth, limited population experiment. The state provides everything for its inhabitants. They use nuclear energy, and although they're energy rich, it comes at a price because no one wants to live near them. They're under constant threat of attack or accident, even though we really looked into nuclear energy and looked at thorium reactors, which are much, much more safe. From one level, it could look like a bit of paradise, but they're a very, very highly disciplined society. And collectively, they could be seen as very selfish society since they separated themselves from everyone else in a wilderness bubble with unlimited supplies of energy. But personally, they have to give up their social and individual freedoms to make the collective work. So there's huge pressures to participate in every aspect of the system by all participants, all citizens. So initially, we were looking at, because vehicles, we were looking, well, what's the largest vehicle in the world? And the largest one at the moment is built by NASA, which allows rockets and aircrafts to to move. It's called the crawler. So we really got into this idea of, well, maybe we could have this land that they live in is a building, a huge building that moves along, densely populated and overcrowded. But we thought there was not much going for this community. It was a little grim. And we had been to, we went to on a road trip in the desert last summer through America, and we were so inspired by all the homesteading communities on the edges of civilizations, on the edges of the deserts, which were full of hope and idealism. You know, we felt that maybe this was a different kind of model for our community. This is some of the places we visited. And we also were starting to visit strange places in the UK, away from isolated places, military sites where people have been sort of forced away. And these become very rich, dense wildlife havens with rare plants and animals not seen in other parts of the country. You know, these abandoned, these abundant, thriving, biodiverse places. And so we thought this could be a sort of rich spin-off to enjoy these very sort of isolated but havens of animals. You know, many inhabitants become bird watchers and involved with the animal kingdom and knowledge. So also we really picked up on the idea that there's so many kind of artificial environments being built today, artificial islands and artificial places, ski slopes in the desert. So we really felt this should be an artificial, highly technological environment that moves through the landscape. So it became this mobile, inhabited landscape like a train. So the longest train in the world is 7 kilometers long in Australia. So what we did was, and it was quite narrow, so we doubled the width and made it half the length. So we've got a 3-kilometer nuclear-powered train, which has a mixture of activities that go on the train. So there are 75 carriages. Each one is 20 meters by 40 meter platforms on 2 sets of tracks. We work with engineers on all the proposals to really look through the technical feasibility for all of them. So they're very plausible and they could all be engineered to work. So we went through quite a long stage. We did all the calculations for them. And then we had to decide whether they should look real or if they should be sort of a more abstract. So, you know, should they have real grass or synthetic material? And so inhabitants live inside this long mountain. And when we were doing this project, we thought, well, is this a point where we should start to make a section like an architect would and literally mark out every single part of this train to say what was going on here? And then we decided we wouldn't. We thought that in some ways we wanted to really leave it up to the imagination for people. So we said there are certain things. We named some of the carriages. So we've got factories and hydroponic gardens, gyms, kitchens, nightclubs, mountains, swimming pools, fish farms, and there are bookable huts at the end. And so and we've actually opened it on the website to allow other people to then start to put what they think this train should be on and who should live on this train and how it should work. So we've left it very, very open-ended. And it's pulled by Thorium community. So these are the pictures of the model itself. This is the actual picture of the train. And all the way through this project, we were trying to mix between real and fictional, but working with both real media and fictional media, and somewhere in between, and to try and find different ways of bringing different realities to bear, mixing these things together as quite experimentally. Actually, it's really, really hard to make it very fictional, make it really unreal rather than fictional. It kept becoming too real. So I'm nearly out of time. So I'm going to not tell you about the bioliberals, but I'm going to zoom through the slides. But essentially, we were looking at a different way of using biotechnology to create different kinds of fuels, but we didn't want to just repeat what was already existing, but really start from general basic principles where perhaps everything is biological, and the combustion never existed at all. And it really is quite a difficult thing to imagine that, because it means that you really go back in time. We went through a whole process of growing the skins in different ways, and the whole process of making it was very much about its biological roots. So this is it even got broken and we had to mend it. This is it. It's got a scar, which is lovely. In the exhibition, one's got a scar. But my last slide. So, as part of this project, we had an expert discussion with a political scientist, a synthetic biologist, an ethicist, an economist, and an author. but not to validate the project or to check it, but more to explore how design like this and processes like this might overlap with their area of expertise and open up new possibilities, to start many new conversations. We see this as a very beginning point of a project, and we're looking really to find new sets of partners to work with. So we see designers participating in conversations with a set of partners perhaps that designers wouldn't normally talk to, and perhaps designers participating with a very different set of tools in much larger ecological frameworks of professionals. I'll finish there. Thank you.